Thank you so much to GSV and to everybody for all the hard work to pull this together. It's a real honor to be here. Thank you, Governor Lee, for joining us.
Glad to. Thank you.
It's a big honor to have a chance to be here in Tennessee. Thank you for hosting. It's a really phenomenal set of things that are happening across the state.
Hope everybody has enjoyed themselves while they're in Nashville. I told them, good. I told Wyatt, I said, the only problem with how fun Nashville is your participants in your program may not be at the 8 o'clock meeting the next morning, but it's okay.
Everybody was really prompt here this morning. It's a really exciting time to be here in Tennessee because of how much growth is happening. So we're sitting on the fastest growing state in the country, 170,000 new jobs created since you took office, $35 billion of capital investment across the state. The conversation theme today is about the Tennessee template. And so I would love to learn, what is the secret?
Before I became governor, I ran a company. I was in the private sector for 35 years and ran that company for 25 years. And so I often think about what, the role of government, whether government can be a help or a hindrance to the private sector. And when I got on this side of it and was suddenly involved in the government, and it shaped policy a lot. How do we create an environment that's productive for companies? I do think that businesses that are looking to relocate, and record numbers of companies are coming into our state from all over the country and the world. Frankly, we have a lot of foreign direct investment here. They want a business-friendly environment, and everyone in here knows what that means. And we've worked really hard to create that, from a tax structure, regulatory environment. CNBC named us as top 3 states in the country for work, business-friendly environments. So companies want to know that the environment they're walking into or investing in is predictable from a tax standpoint or regulatory standpoint. But the other thing they care about is workers, workforce development. At the end of the day, if there's not workers for their company, whatever industry they are in, if there aren't workers, they're not going to come. And the state with the workers will win every time. We tell our folks that. And that's the type of environment that we're trying to create in our state. Yeah.
Well, one of the most important headline announcements you made in the last 2 years is around the Blue Cities project. And it was 2 years ago this month that Ford Motor Company announced this $5 billion direct investment in Haywood County, a rural county just east of Memphis. Big challenge around skilled worker shortages, a big challenge around having enough skilled workforce to be able to drive forward that project and others like it. How do you think about tackling that challenge?
That was one of the most exciting and one of the most challenging job recruitment efforts that we had made, but it was a lot of fun. And, Ford could have chosen any state in America to invest. They're building their first plant in 50 years, the largest investment by a Ford Motor Company in its history. And they had any spot in America to pick. We spent a lot of time talking to them about why we thought Tennessee was the right place, all the reasons that I discussed earlier, but much of that was centered around the ability to provide jobs, to provide workers. They were going to provide the jobs, 6,000 of them, and more importantly, the ecosystem around that plant, we estimate will require 30,000 workers. That is a big task in the middle of a very rural part of Tennessee. Now, it is 40 miles from downtown Memphis, so there's a large pool from which Blue Oval City can pull from, but it was a challenge nonetheless. I sat in Detroit across the table from the COO and gave a 30-minute pitch about why we could deliver the workers like no other state. And we have a strategy that we began in 2019 when I came in. So my background is in skilled trades. I ran a plumbing and HVAC and electrical and construction related mechanical services business. I'm a mechanical engineer. We design and build and maintain mechanical plumbing electrical systems. So welders, plumbers, pipe fitters, electricians, technicians, 1,500 of them when I left 5 years ago. And I understood how challenging it is to get workers and skilled workers. So when I came into office, we started the governor's investment in vocational education. We passed the GIVE Act, which put $1 million grants in high schools for CTE programs. Penny Schwinn is sitting out here. She's the former commissioner of education, and I didn't know you were going to be here, but when I saw you, she and I did that together along with the General Assembly and everybody else who does things in government together. But the GIVE Act was something I was passionate about. It was about vocational education. We followed that up year after year. $500 million putting CTE in each middle school and high school in the state. Last year, we put $1 billion into our post-secondary colleges of technology that have a 90% job placement rate in the field in which they study. So I sat across from Ford and said, we have a plan. Here's the GIVE Act. We'll put a GIVE grant in every high school around your plant. Here's our colleges of technology. We'll build one on your plant, and we will coordinate efforts from the surrounding communities to make sure that we have the workers that you need. And they came.
Yeah. Well, one of those efforts in the surrounding communities was our collaboration together.
That's right.
2 years ago that I sat across from you and you said, this is really one of the most important things we're going to do while I'm in office. And our company is very focused on building software to expand access to skilled trades and to accelerate the pathways for people to combat the skilled worker shortage. And so you challenged us to come to Tennessee, and we launched the company here along with the West Tennessee Associated Builders and Contractors. We're joined by their chairman, Brian Haynes, today, and excited to be announcing a case study about the impact of that work a year in. So thinking back to that, you had a chance to look at that and be there in person and see the project. What do you think are the key things to hone in on around private sector investment in training, so directly investing in workforce?
Yeah, so if you think about that, we need 30,000 workers in West Tennessee, which that's part of why when we met and you were talking about what you were doing, we said, please come to Memphis. And there's an enormous opportunity for that city and community to connect to all of the opportunity that's out there in West Tennessee. But as you and I have talked before, and I'd like to remind people all the time, government is not the answer to the problems we face. Government can't solve workforce shortage. Government doesn't create jobs. Government, or they shouldn't be creating too many jobs. I've tried to reduce the size of government, but government it has a very important role, and it's to create an environment where the people can solve the problems that you have. We have a workforce shortage problem in America. We have one in Tennessee. Government, there are a lot of things that we're trying to do, and we are doing, and different departments have different strategies. But at the end of the day, the private sector has to create new workers. The private sector has to engage in workforce development. The public-private nonprofit partnerships where there is expertise in each one of those groups, and then they come together and create sort of an expert circle, that's where the workers will come from within that circle. And what you're doing, you've got an industry organization, you've got companies that have the need. You have companies that can provide a high-skilled paying job. And then you have a collaboration within the city council there. So there were dollars behind an innovative program that kind of pulled all this together and said, how do we solve the problem of getting the workers we need for this enormous opportunity that the region has found itself with? and y'all are delivering on that.
Yeah, well, for every dollar of training in that program, it creates $8 of wages in the same year. And so the multiplier impact on being able to expand it is really important. And you mentioned Shelby County being very focused on how to help accelerate that work. You're thinking hard about ways to scale up things that work across the state. You're thinking about the budget, and that's coming up for the spring session. What are the sort of elements around scaling up things that work 100x, making them much more impactful that you think about from a framework standpoint?
Part of that, because you obviously have ideas about how you could do that, part of that is to pull information from industry itself. So we have worked, beginning with Give Grant and grant dollars to particular skilled worker programs, to this CTE technical college support. But we've also, across departments, tried to create innovative ways to enhance the number of people that are coming into the workforce in Tennessee, workforce engagement, workforce participation. It isn't what it should be. COVID messed a lot of that up for a lot of folks. And so we are working with, veteran services departments to engage those coming back from service. We are working with, I've spent 25 years in a reentry program as a volunteer in a reentry program for formerly incarcerated men, incarcerated men on their last year before they were reentered. And, there's an enormous opportunity there to provide skills for those that are going to be coming back into the workforce effectively. So we've unique populations that help, but the broader population, programs through Department of Human Services, Economic and Community Development, Department of Labor and Workforce, all of those have either grant programs for incumbent workers to skill them up, or for new workers, wage reimbursement grants that we have available to companies and private sector for those that are willing to bring on new workers and train them for a period of time. We want to partner with that private sector. We have a lot of ideas, but let me just say this. As a former, employer and person who ran a company, our ideas need to come from the private sector. I mean, we have ideas, we have our departments, we have people focused on this, but I tell our people all the time in government, the private sector knows what they need right there, right now in that spot. Let's don't create something for them. Let them tell us what we should be creating. So my thought is to connect with, and you and I have talked about this a lot, and it is to connect with nonprofits, with private sector, with technology-based companies that are giving the tools necessary to those companies that need the workers, and then have them say, hey, how can we come alongside you and help? How can the state, how can government be helpful? We got all these departments and all these access and all these opportunities to support you, but you need to tell us what you want, and we'll help create the environment for you to build the workers.
Yep. We've helped a lot of companies apply for those grants, and it's challenging. It's challenging because there's lots of rule sets, and often there's requirements that are well-intentioned but maybe don't always make sense. And so I'm curious how you think about, as a leader in the public sector, reforming that system and having your eye on how to create really good outcomes and working towards that end state.
Yesterday, I had what we call a rural summit in our state. We have the county mayors, school board leaders, chamber leaders of the 15 or 16 or 17 most economically challenged counties and rural counties in our state. They all come together. We meet for a couple days. They interact with all of our state departments. And the most effective thing we do is say, what can we do better at the state? And part of that is exactly what you're saying. It's too hard to get this. This department is not consistent with this department in providing funding for this, that, or the other. I came from, like I said, I came from the side of the fence where I had to deal with state agencies as a business owner, and I found myself thinking, there's got to be an easier way to do that. We challenge our teams with that all the time, but the best way to get input from that is to have the private sector engaged with us, and we invite people all the time. You know how to reach us, you know how to reach me, you know how to reach how to engage with our commissioners and our departments, and we want to make it easy for our customers, the people of Tennessee, the businesses of Tennessee, the private sector, the nonprofits that are engaging in workforce development. We desperately need these workers because the state where the workers will win. We have to make it easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think it creates a big impact around people when you can reform those requirements. And to celebrate Chancellor Tidings and the work that your two-year college system is doing, we've been a partner to TCAT, the Tennessee College of Applied Technology, as a tenant. So we're leasing space from them in Memphis right now, and thinking through ways in which you can drive more utilization of fixed assets that the state's investing in to get better outcomes for people. That's a big testament to your administration and pushing for reform there. I'm curious how you think about people. So personnel is policy in many cases, and how do you think about recruiting people into leadership roles, and what's your model for how to think about casting that out?
When you ask that question, this is a little bit off to one side of your answer, but when I think about people and why we do all this, why we do all the things that we do, at the end of the day, it kind of reverts back to people. Tennessee has the lowest tax rate per capita, second lowest tax rate per capita right now. It switches back and forth, but we have the second lowest tax rate per capita of all 50 states. We have the fastest growing economy, if not the second or third or second or first, depending on, we have one of the fastest growing economies in America. We have the lowest debt per capita of any state in the country, number one for that. Those statistics, we have 8,000 apprentices. We have doubled the number of apprentices from the years that I came into office. We have this Apprenticeship Tennessee program that has 350 some apprenticeship programs where we connect people who need work with those who are creating apprenticeship programs. And we had 3,000 apprentices just last year added to the roles. Statistics and numbers are great when you're describing what it is that your metrics are, and if you don't measure things, you don't know where you are. But at the end of the day, if you're me, it is about that Tennessean, that person that's living in that county, and are the things that you're doing creating an opportunity for them to live a better life?
Yep.
Are you creating an ability for them to do better for their kids than they were before? And I remember my wife and I, when we were campaigning for governor, we would drive out in the middle of a far off county, and just to remind ourselves why we were riding around in an old RV and grinding it out day after day, I would say, you know what? Look at that mailbox and the house that it leads to. I wonder what matters to them. Mm. And when we do our work together, we remind ourselves that the work is going to impact that mailbox life potentially by creating opportunity for a job in rural West Tennessee, in one of the most economically distressed parts of the state. That has to drive the things that we do to create opportunity for people. I mentored a kid in the inner city years ago before I ever ran for governor. Spent an evening a week every week with him for 5 years. His mom was in prison. His dad he didn't know his father. And that relationship shaped how I view education, opportunity, the purpose of education, the ability to change the trajectory of a family's history and legacy forever. It's those kinds of interactions with people and reminding yourself that that is what we're doing this for, that makes it worth it.
Well, there's a young man we're profiling today named Edgar Andrade, who I'd love to tell his story really quickly. So Edgar is an immigrant to the United States. He's got 2 young kids. He wanted a better life for those kids and his family. He was working as a quick service restaurant, cash register attendant at Chick-fil-A, so he's got a really good service orientation. But Edgar took a big leap to say, I want to become an electrician. He joined this program. He's working for Pier Electric, was just promoted in the last 2 weeks. And so he and people like him are, on average, experiencing a 30% increase in their wages less than 15 months after taking the leap. And so you think about people like Edgar, and there's lots of Edgars around the state and across the country. Right now, it's very difficult for those people to have the mobility to be able to seek training, because the friction that they face as a person that is hustling to make rent and to be able to cover their bills is really high. And so what are the ways that we can help make dollars more flexible, or help make programs that are intending to help Edgar structured in such a way that he can benefit from them, that takes some of that friction out?
Yeah, so fortunately for me, as I think through some of these things, you know, I worked with 1,000 Edgars who, a whole lot of the folks that I worked with before that were part of our company, many of them had not gone to college. Many of them had gotten skilled through their apprenticeship work at the company, working alongside other, and you had this incredible opportunity to watch people navigate their way through a career in a company and really kind of live that better life for them. But you also get to see the biggest challenges they face. And you know, when you think about folks that are entering that, some of the folks that you worked with in Memphis through your program that have upskilled and upscaled their wages by 30 or 40%, they had to enter. And when they entered, you know, childcare, transportation, housing, those are tough, you know, hurdles. They're tough parts of the environment to navigate. When I talked about that kid I mentored, what happened to me was I got to have an insight into a life that had all kinds of hurdles and barriers to success that were not of his own making, right? So they were there, and he had to figure out a way to navigate through them. Those are the things that we've got to work with our private sector partners, and state government has to create, innovate. We've been talking about that a lot in the last couple of weeks. Housing is huge, affordable housing, a huge problem, especially in a state for whom, you know, housing prices are rising rapidly, and there's all this economic growth, and, you know, cities are expanding and growing, and that creates an affordable housing problem. And we can't solve it, but we can solve it. That's always my encouragement to folks is the government. We can't solve it, but together, the government and the private sector and the nonprofits and individuals and community organizations, and, you know, that together we can solve that problem. And, you know, as I listed before, childcare and others, those are a very important part of creating and developing a workforce that's going to be there to meet the needs of the next generation of companies.
Right. Well, you've been very focused on school choice as one of those policy objectives, and there's a lot of folks in this room who've done work in the school choice movement. There's also folks that are thinking hard about things like education savings accounts and ESAs and how they can help create more options for people. That's been a focus of your administration in the past. You're getting ready for another legislative session. How do you think about that policy topic? What's your perspective on it?
It was, you know, my very first State of the State address, 1 month into being the governor. I said, you know, everybody in our state ought to have a choice about where they go to school. And we introduced an education savings account piece of legislation, and that passed narrowly with limited, it's in our 3 biggest cities and serves hundreds of thousands of children. You know, my experience, I go back to that story of the young man. I had a relationship, of course, with his grandmother who he lived with, and he was failing every subject when I met him. Had an F on his report card in every subject. And he and his grandmother and I worked together to try to find the right fit for a school for him. He was actually moved into a public charter school where his educational trajectory entirely changed from the school that he was in. That is when I realized that every kid is different. Every kid learns differently. Every kid has unique challenges and opportunities and giftings and challenges with their abilities. Every kid's different. We should have as many possible choices for that child as we can provide for them to find the right path for success. I'm a strong believer in school choice. I had a kid that was homeschooled, public schooled, private schooled. Different kids need different things at different times. Our public school system is strong in this state, and we have a lot of work to do, but we've put $1 billion and reformulated our funding formula. We have the largest teacher pay raise in our state's history. It'll put us in the top 10 states for teacher pay. We have to invest heavily in public education because that's where the vast number of our kids go to school. And I'm a believer that school choice is not about picking one type of school over another. It's about having them all and having them all be the best option possible. And you can have the best public schools and choices for kids as well. So I started my very first, week working on this, and I expect I'll be working on it till my last week.
Yeah, and for entrepreneurs in the room or policymakers in the room who for this is a big issue for them, or really for any person that's building a company that you are giving advice to as a person that led in the private sector and now obviously has a major leadership role in the public sector, what counsel do you offer? What's your point of view around how to be effective in building a venture to help to make a difference there?
I think, I think whatever you do, if you're thinking about the ability to create a greater opportunity for that person that either works for you or is going to work for you or work within your company, whenever you can make your decisions based on how it is that you're going to make life better for your constituency, whatever, your workers, your citizens, your students, if you're in an educational field. And there are always different opinions about how that can happen, but you got to find what you believe and listen to folks that have experience with it, and then say, and personally, you have your own personal experiences. My personal experience with that young man shaped my view of educational reform forever. But it was focused on, and you said earlier, considering people, right? So it's focused on the person, focusing on the worker or the child or the entrepreneur. How is it that we create an opportunity for them to succeed?
Yep. Well, and GSV makes investments in lots of companies across the pre-K to grade spectrum. UpSmith is really privileged to be one of those companies. As you think about lessons we can take from the Tennessee template, from the way that you've helped to drive a vision for growth here to different parts of the country, different states, different cities, what encouragement would you give everyone as they prepare to go back?
Well, part of what I would say is look at what you all have done. Because the example of what you're doing, your company and the experience you have with ABC in West Tennessee and local construction companies, all things that I'm very familiar with because I was a part of all of that, but in Middle Tennessee. It's a bit of a next phase of the Tennessee template, right? Because it's an example, it was kind of a pilot. We talked about doing this. It is, in fact, a real partnership between the private and the nonprofit and the public, and it's a pulling together of all of those and coming together and saying, how are we going to create more workers? How are we going to do better by the workers that we have? How are we going to give this company the workforce they need? How are we going to give these workers higher wages? How are we going to give opportunity for these who want to be workers? And by the way, the city and the community desperately needs this because that's what generates economic growth and the next phase of opportunity for the next round. That is a model that should be magnified, it should be duplicated, it should be upscaled. We plan to work to do that. We have other models around the state that we're testing out as well. How does this entity, state government, who has a real desire to be a state that is engaging workers at a high level, worker participation rate, huge desire to create more workers. I want to be able to sit across from more major corporations and sit across the table from them and say, let me tell you why you should be coming to our state. And then they will locate in another rural county or another area, part of the state that needs workers and for who those families can live a better life for their children, all of that. We at state government have that desire, and we do not have the capacity to meet that desire. But we do have the capacity when partnering together and having ideas from the private sector and partnering like you are in Memphis. We actually can pull that off on a statewide basis. That's our vision.
We have time for 2 questions. If anybody has a question for Governor Lee that you'd like to pose, there are a couple mics in the back, and please say your name, where you're from, and what's on your mind. And I have more, Governor Lee, if it's
yeah, that's fine.
Fine.
There's members of the media in here, and whenever people don't ask questions, I say, well, this evidently is not a press avail.
The school choice part, I'm from Utah. Utah also just recently passed school choice legislation, got it passed, but was not able to enact it essentially just in the face of opposition. I know it can be a topic, can be highly charged. I'd love just maybe a double click. You said you got it narrowly passed. You want to see the public schools do well. But what is some of the opposition you faced in getting that bill through?
What was Utah's bill? Do you know if it was universal school choice? Do you know particulars about it?
Some, but certainly not an expert. As I understand it, it gave every family about $8,000 per student to take to whatever entity that they chose.
So we passed education savings account legislation in 2019, and it was limited to the 2 largest school districts in the state. It's now been expanded to the 3rd one, and it has an income restriction on it. So it's for the lowest income families in a district that has, I think the requirement initially, and it still is, 10 or more of what we call the lowest performing schools. So you had to fall in that district, and you had to be in that income range, and then you could receive that dollars. There's that the push to expand that has been there all along, and it was a lot of opposition. We got sued. It got tied up in court. It was held up in court for 2 years, and finally the state Supreme Court ruled that it was a constitutional piece of legislation and was allowed to begin, which it did last fall, and we've enrolled. Don't know exactly the numbers, but thousands of children have enrolled in that program. I think the greatest opposition is uncertainty. People are uncertain about what effect a major change is going to have on their school, on their kid, on their community. And I get that. You know, there's concern about, well, what's that going to do to our school if some kids leave it and dollars eventually leave the funding for that public school? And oftentimes the public school is the largest employer in a rural county, and that's concerning for people. The good news is that what we have found in states that have had similar programs for many years is that public schools and educational choice can exist and can thrive. And what really happens is, as is in the case of Florida, if you look at the data with Florida, who's had some years of school choice, a lot longer, it looks different ways throughout the year, but their outcomes are great, and they dramatically improved. And their public school system wasn't damaged because of the options that are given. What happened, you actually have an increased performance by both public schools and private schools and homeschooling alike. And at the end of the day, if you're someone who's trying to find the policy that is going to change more kids' lives for good, then you want to find the strategy that has the best outcomes educationally for kids. And that strategy is multiple choices for families. Nobody knows better than a parent what their kid needs from an educational standpoint. So you ought to give that parent multiple choices, and then they can choose what's best for their kid, and their kid's gonna have better outcomes that way. It just makes sense intuitively, and it actually plays out from a data and an evidence standpoint. But uncertainty and change for human beings is tough on all of us. And people like status quo, and they like the way it's always been, and they are afraid of changing it. And we just have to continue to say, but if we do this, this is what's going to happen. And I think it's a national sweeping conversation. 5 states, I think, last year passed universal school choice. That was unheard of when I proposed it in 2019. And the idea that 5 states in 1 year would pass it. This is an increasing conversation, mainly because people realize, hey, this works, and it's a good idea.
Perhaps more to come in 2024. All right, well, thank you for your time. We exhausted the time we had left for that. Grateful to have you here. Thanks for being here.